and we're actually going to go into our Ignite series. So for those of you who have not been to a DevOps Days conference or seen an Ignite talk before, these are a little bit different. So the speakers that are coming up have essentially a 5-minute time slot, and their slides are timed. They change every 15 seconds. So it's a little bit different. We have a group of presenters for you today. Got to get out my list here. Coming to you from all different backgrounds. I believe kicking us off is Alan Kraft from the U.S. Patent and Trade Office. And let's... There we go. Oh, he was. I am totally wrong. So number one is actually a revision of the menu, and that's Mary Yonts from Taos. Then it will be Alan Kraft, Gareth Greenway, Ben Rockford, Caskey Dixon, and Jason Han. Or wait. Is that right? Maybe. Maybe I got that all right. We'll see. We'll see who comes up, and that'll... No. We've got Mary, Alan, Gareth, Caskey, and Jason.
Yeah,
that's
so there's a whole order on there.
So we have everything set up for you guys up here. So Mary, if you want to come up.
Oh, I told her she was last, so we'll start her first. All right.
Yeah.
Here's your radio.
Up to you, or you can argue with Alan and see if he wants to go first. I mean, you guys can fight it out. It's always fun to see, a royal battle in front of. Yeah? So as soon as you hit play from start, it takes over.
Okay. All right. So let's see.
That one.
All right.
There you go.
So hi, folks. It's going to go pretty rapid, but this is my help you a little bit. I am in risk and compliance. I do a function that I've been told is the most unsexy job in IT. So what I do is I herd the controls, make sure everybody's controls are working effectively, and make sure that as controls change, we know where those controls are, and we're still able to place reliance on those controls. I don't think this thing is moving, Ryan. Just to say. So the transitions aren't working, guys. This is my fault for saying at lunch there was like really smooth.
Welcome to the offside of DevOps.
Yeah.
If you want to just get to the next page.
Yeah?
You can count to 15.
You can count to 15. That's all right.
Please hold.
Okay, so what I wanted to chat about was reaching out. We're all going to be very excited after this. We're going to want to take action, do something really cool in our environment. And what I want to kind of say is please reach out to your compliance and security person. There's little nuggets, little controls in our environment that we care a lot about. And when those things go away and monitoring stops on them because someone moved, it's really difficult for us to tell the auditors about what happened. I love these. You hate them, I know. I read some of this and I'm like, no, they didn't. Did they? And I know it's a complete drag for you guys. Each of these has controls in the environment. So there are controls that are needed for PCI that are really prescriptive, things for ISO 27001 at a really high level. And what we want to do is embed those controls within the solutions that we're maintaining. So, and what my kind of job is to try and make it transparent. So when you're seeing a control for change control for PCI DSS, hopefully I can get it in a way that will meet SOX and will meet some of these other control challenges. So controls, Netflix had this awesome thing where they don't really have controls but have responsibilities, and I think it's right on. So controls really where I look at it is I go to a control owner and I say, PCI really needs this thing. It's quite prescriptive. And we talk about where the risk is and how we can do the thing, how we can do it without, hampering the processes too much, but still get the same level of effectiveness of the control and diligence. So as we look toward doing DevOps, what I'm looking for is people with the responsibility to say, hey, I know you rely on this control for PCI DSS, but I can still get you there. It's just going to be different. So here's the security baked in concept. And this is kind of putting in those controls within the environment, within your solutions. We've talked about maintenance security for years. But as you guys go through it, I think there's additional automation opportunities for you. When you look at a DevOps mindset, there's some scanning opportunities and some different things that we can bake in as we go that'll help you to demonstrate the diligence that'll meet those compliance requirements. So one of the challenges I have with DevOps, one thing that's been kind of hard for people in my realm of existence is SOT, and that's segregation of duties. And this is in a way making sure that someone is not carrying one process all the way to the end by themselves. So we want segregation of duties, but we want to do it smart. So if we can do it with the buddy system and somebody releases your code after you create it, maybe that's an opportunity. There are other ways to do it. And then as we get into deployment, maybe we need segregation of duties and have somebody deploy for us, or maybe we have a tool that just says, I know that you tested this thing because it was in QA, and I'm going to ship that same code. I have to check some. I know what you tested. We're going to deploy exactly what you tested. So I have the assurance that what we deployed was what we tested. We can do so rapidly, but I have a tool that will assist, perhaps. So those kind of things help a lot. And then finally, evidence of reporting. So when we talk about all those acronyms, they all need a certain level of reporting to be there. So I just go back to the team and I say, show me your good work. Show me the evidence of where you had the certain activity that allowed you to be really confident that it's going to work and it's going to be secure. And let's talk about the additional steps we need to make. And then reporting and remediation go hand in hand. So I can do reporting through the monitoring a little bit, and I can do kind of a reporting on that particular control pretty quickly, and then maybe I can take action and automate somebody to do remediation for my control. Maybe my control went sideways, and I can say, I saw it, now I'm going to go ahead and take action. And if I'm really clever, maybe I can do an orchestration and create the ticket that says I did the thing, and I fixed it. So that I can show the evidence of proof that I went ahead and fixed that and still meet my obligations. So in closing, I just want to kind of have you guys please check in with the security and compliance people. We like you. And I think we can be an asset and help work with you. I think you're good.
So Brian, where are these in the collection? Oh, awesome. This one here. This is the ops part of DevOps, obviously. Yeah. This is what happens when you put a Linux sysadmin in front of a Mac system. Where's my LibreOffice? Awesome.
You already have the transitions in there.
Yeah.
You're good to go.
Okay.
Just click that.
Super. Here we go. So in a Velocity Conference interview on blameless postmortems, John Allspaw said that we could learn a lot from Ivan Populity and his wildland firefighting colleagues at the U.S. Forest Service Office for Learning. It was just a brief hint, but it immediately resonated with me because of a family connection with wildland firefighting. And one of the things that really struck me was at the end of the interview, Allspaw said that he felt compelled to enter into a master's degree program to pursue this more thoroughly. And I kind of thought, you know, this is 2014, John Allspaw, he needs to get into another degree program. This is my father-in-law, Larry Young. He was from Idaho and he worked for the Bureau of Land Management as a range manager. But in wildland firefighting season, he fought wildland fire from California to Alaska and all across the Intermountain West. There was a common thread that run through his wildland firefighting stories. It was the need to constantly adapt to the dynamic and ever-shifting nature of wildland fires. Let's talk about a few types of that adaptation. There's a need for organizational adaptation. Here's Larry and his colleagues at the early days of the Boise Interagency Fire Center, which has now evolved to the National Interagency Fire Center up at the airport. There are simple kinds of adaptations like these tools, the Pulaski and McLeod, named after the firefighters who invented them. Also complicated adaptations like smoke jumping and single engine air tankers. Here's the firefighter and the gear. Note the labels. And the smile is labeled. And that's significant because socio-technical adaptations are required to make this work. There are seen and unseen systems. In this crew, in this photo, all these crews are different complex adaptive systems, but off-site, there's logistics, fire weather, what David Woods has called a complex adaptive universe. Here's Woods quoting Allspaw, adaptation is normal, can't be proceduralized, and is really hard to see. See if you can spot the adaptation in this next picture. It's a remote weather station, but I'll bet that there's nowhere in the manual that says if you find a rock, you can make a more ergonomic workstation for the operator. People are going to adapt in ways unexpected by the designers of systems. In this article, Ivan Populity provides a really good overview if you're into how the firefighting community adopted these learning reviews to gain resilience. The genesis of this was a tragedy that spawned a 3-year study, and they came up with several recommendations, and one was get a lessons learned center for the entire wildland firefighting community and do a leadership program. At the Lessons Learned Center, they've got innovative ways of getting the information out to their community. And one of the things that they started to do was to leverage the TED Ed framework from the folks who started the TED Ed talks. This Alaba fire video is just a indelible kind of learning. There's a link to the video in the image, and then that TED Ed graphic has a link to this and other collections of these lessons. So this lesson is on a concept called margin for maneuver, which is a way for people to make sense of dynamic, complex situations and expand their options for adapting. So Ivan Populity went on to do a PhD thesis, and he documented this transformation within the Forest Service. And one of the things that really struck me was this quote. But it's a really compelling read, and the principles and practices are very applicable to our domain. And this is the kind of thing that AllSpa said that we needed to start pursuing. So a lot of dense material in here. The slides will be up, and there are links in all these references. They're also up at Google Docs at that link. And hope this has been interesting, and if you're interested, dive in and learn more. Thanks to the DevOps Days Boise organizers and to all of you for being here, for everyone who makes DevOps Days our Lessons Learned Center. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm fighting a cold, so if there's an excess amount of sniffing, I apologize. I will be blaming the microphone and other speakers if that happens. Where is the present button? Slideshow. Okay, so this is leaving an open source project. I want to preface before I begin, this is not meant to be a how-to or a suggestion. If anyone decides to leave their project after this talk, it's a complete coincidence, so please don't blame me. So earlier this year, I decided to leave a job that I'd been at for just over 2 years. It's not uncommon in the technology industry. We tend to leave jobs frequently. We get bored. I especially did. So this is a long transition. It is a good slide. That's not me. Oh, come on. All right, we're just jumping ahead. All right, so it was a typical transition. I told my supervisor that I was leaving, met with HR, did the whole exit interview. My coworkers decided to take me out to the traditional going away lunch. We had a usual spot that everyone knew was kind of the quote unquote place that you went when it was your last day, whether you quit or you were fired. Did my slides not get the transitions? All right, I'll just click. What are we on? 4. So a few months later, I made an even more difficult decision. I decided to leave an open source project that I had helped start, and I'd been helping to run for 14 years. Something I'd been doing longer than my last 5 jobs combined. So the general reaction was surprise, mostly because no one knew what that meant. No one in a leadership position had left the project, so no one really knew what that meant for the project, especially me. So I started thinking about just leaving projects in general, like what that meant. Kind of the approaches that people took and how kind of the general reaction to those approaches was. So I started talking to people, kind of to get their general, get the general idea of how their experience was. And the reasons, or the experiences varied quite, reasons varied as much as the experiences that they had. So people chose to leave projects for a variety of reasons. Either a lack of time in their life, or they moved on from a job where they'd been contributing to the project. And sometimes people left for unpleasant reasons. In these cases, because many open source projects do not have an HR department, people didn't know who to go to if they had a grievance with another contributor or even a leader of the project. So a lot of times these people would end up leaving very vocally. I'm sure everyone has heard of some projects where that's happened recently. Oftentimes when this happens, it leads to either a fork of a project or a completely new one starts up. Again, I'm sure we can all think of a few where that's happened. So if you've decided to leave a project, again, I'm not suggesting it, what does that mean? Like, does it mean that you are no longer part of that community behind that project? Can you no longer contribute if you're in a leadership role in that project? Assuming that you decide to leave amicably, what does the transition process look like? Is there one in place? Does the project have an exit interview if you're in a leadership position? And why not? Do you give any sort of notice? What about any sort of announcement? Do you make the announcement? Does the project make the announcement? What is and is not appropriate to say? Most projects don't have people sign NDAs when they join. And if they do, is that even enforceable? So most of the people I talked to said there had been no announcement when they decided to leave. And most people that left didn't even mention it because they considered their role rather minor in the project. If you're a founding member of a project and you start that project within a company, what happens if you leave that company? Is the project owned by the company? Is it owned by you? And who owns the project now? And speaking with the leaders of a handful of open source projects, most groups indicated they didn't have an action plan in place of what happens if someone in a prominent role left. Other groups indicated that they wish they had a plan in place because people had left and it had caused all sorts of chaos. So what can we do as project leaders to make things better? We can ensure there's a documented process of what happens, not just when someone joins a project, but also when someone leaves. We can make sure that there's some sort of governance in place. That way, if someone in a prominent position leaves and all the assets are in their name, that the assets remain, within the project, not within that individual person. So I realize this is a much bigger topic that can be handled in a 5-ish minute talk, but I'm hoping that this sparks a conversation and that we're able to make the transition of both in and out of projects easier, just as the way someone enters an open source project dictates how their experience goes. The way that someone leaves a project or exits a project both dictates how their experience is, but also the people that remain in the project. And this has been Leaving an Open Source Project. Thank you.
I'm going to take the trust but verify approach.
One quick note for all of our speakers. If you're going to walk away from the podium, there's a lovely little handheld. If you could take that with you, it would be much appreciated by the people in the back.
I'll take that. Check, check, check. Okay, perfect. All right, let's see if this works. Hey, all right. So that's me. I'm Jason Hand. I'm with VictorOps, DevOps Evangelist. I'll be giving a talk later on today. But today's topic, a lot of the other speakers have actually already kind of set me up for this, which is really nice. So I'm going to be talking about how we can take feedback and run that through a systems lens and actually understand that feedback a little bit. So I thought we'd better start off by sort of unpacking what I mean when I say systems, feedback, and systems thinking. So the first thing that we'll talk about is the system. Now, when I say system, I'm not talking about the complex distributed systems that many of us have built or are trying to maintain or trying to build. What I'm talking about is just systems in general. So it's the interdependent components that all make up a quote-unquote system. And that can be anything. That can be us working with each other and also the things that we built. And then the feedback, we hear a lot about feedback loops in DevOps, the OODA loop, the plan, do, check, act, the ITIL one that somebody brought up earlier, but I'm talking about the feedback between humans, the feedback between you and I, between your coworkers, between your bosses, between your whoever, even your partners at home. And then systems thinking is something we talk a lot about within DevOps because it helps you to understand the holistic point, or the holistic view of a situation. We understand, especially within complex environments, that things don't sort of have a cause and effects in a very linear manner. It's not sort of like the domino effect. Everything sort of contributes to itself. So everything's always playing back, cycling back into itself. And the thing about systems thinking, when we don't really have it, we tend to sort of let our own view of the situation skew the actual truth of what's going on. So if we can switch to the systems lens, we can actually start to understand all of the independent contributing factors or all of the things that sort of contribute to the system as a whole. So this talk is to hopefully break down 5 key benefits of how you can take a systems thinking approach towards the feedback with other people and hopefully have a lot more deeper understanding and a truer understanding of the situation. The first benefit we've got is accuracy. Your feedback is going to be a whole lot more accurate if you start to actually understand how all of the different sort of, I like to say contributing factors, how they all play a role in the system or in the feedback itself. So things become a lot more true in nature. We just have a little bit more legitimate sense of what took place. Then the other one is this idea of discarding judgment. We hear a lot in DevOps about how we need to remove blame, how it has no place, and especially in post-incident analysis, post-mortems, that kind of thing, and it helps you reduce that blame and that judgment. The next one is that it enhances accountability and responsibility, and I think I need to point out there's a difference between those two things. Accountability, we often misuse. We say we need to hold someone accountable. Well, what you actually mean is we need to hold someone responsible. When we say we want accountability, we want someone to give an accurate account of what took place, and that's it. There's no actual responsibility to that. And then also the blame, we want to try to shift blame. We're really good at putting blame not only on others, but ourselves. We'll say, hey, that was my fault, that was my bad. When we take a systems thinking approach, it helps us reduce that. And then the quick fixes, the things that actually are only very temporary, we can actually start to remove that from our conversations and from our feedback as well. Okay, so maybe you're thinking, I get it, I think I get it. I'm drinking your Kool-Aid, I understand this to a little bit, but how do I apply this? Because it seems good in nature in theory, but I need to know how to take this back to my team or my partner or whoever. So I've got just 3 things to suggest, 3 questions to ask yourself. The first one is, what are the differences between you, the giver, and the receiver of the feedback? We hear, obviously, in DevOps that we've got our development, we've got our operations team, we've got all these other pieces in the units of IT. Consider the differences in those two, and just in that sort of basic thing when it comes to the feedback that you're giving. And then also, is the feedback partly related to the differing roles? So specifically to the actual roles that everybody has, when you're giving and receiving feedback, how is that playing a part in that feedback itself as well? You have to think of it in a more holistic view. And then last, are the processes, policies, physical location, and other factors, what are those doing to reinforce? We have a lot of, in some cases, we have a lot of distributed teams, people working around the world. How does that play a role in the feedback that we're giving and receiving as well? At the end of the day, I think you're going to like sort of taking this approach because we're all problem solvers. We all like to break down puzzles and try to understand things. And this gives us a new way at approaching feedback when we start to look at it in a systems thinking lens. So real quick, as a summary, if you weren't paying attention, I'm not going to read them off, but these are the 5 key benefits of taking a systems thinking approach and running that through like this systems lens quote type thing, and applying it to the feedback that you give and receive with your coworkers, with really everybody that you interact with. Now, a lot of these ideas I blatantly stole from this book that I read over the holidays last year called Thanks for the Feedback. I highly recommend it. This was just a little small section out of there, but it does a really good job of helping you understand better ways to sort of manage people and manage conversations. The other sort of same selfless plug there is I've got a ChatOps book. They're free over at the VictorOps table. Definitely come grab one or download one from here. And that's my time. Thanks.
wasting all my time.
Wasting all my time. All right, here we go. Get my cat picture out of the way right up front. This talk is basically how everything old is new again, and everything we thought we knew about operations really was discovered by a man in the 17th century. Miyamoto Musashi, you can read about him on Wikipedia. We don't need to go into his life. Basically, he killed people pretty well. He's one of the most storied samurais in Japanese history. In Buddhism, there are 5 levels of reality going from the earth to the ethereal, just like in network stacks. He organized his wisdom into a series of 5 books named after those. The first and the last book are basically about the way of the way, and the middle books are all about lots of different ways of killing people. But he has wisdom in the way of the way, where he talks about things that are applicable to our lives. Doesn't matter, avoid the petty fights, Emacs, VI, tabs, spaces. What's important is getting the job done. And he knew that, and he felt that whether you use the long sword or the short sword, you could kill people just as well. He then goes on to say that you need to know the smallest things, the biggest things, everything up and down. He basically was the world's first full stack samurai. And that's not necessarily true, but you do need to understand the context of everything in your environment. He knew about monitoring. If you know one thing, you can know 10,000 things. Knowing those key metrics that describe your entire product, if you know what that number is doing, you get a good feel for the whole entirety of your environment. Find that metric. He understood scale, scope. If you can manage one system with automated deployment, you can manage 1,000 systems with automated deployment. Automation is key. Kill 1 man, kill 10 million men. It all works. He also understood latency. He knew that everything in his book was all about time to kill, right? The effectiveness of killing people as rapidly as possible. Similarly, in our systems, latency is key. Network latency, call latency, inter-process graph latency. The faster your service is, the more your customers will be able to get done. Do not think dishonestly. Don't kid yourself about the reality of your environment. Know your service is up because you've actually checked and you're tracking those values that are key performance metrics that your customers understand. Training. Practice your disaster recovery techniques. Practice your procedures. Do you have tech support troubleshooting guides and operations manuals that you haven't used in a while? Do they still work the way you thought they worked? Practice, practice, practice. If there's not a disaster going on, make a disaster and try and practice your process. Be acquainted with every art. He doesn't say know every art. Be acquainted. Know your system's dependencies and how they fail and how your system will behave as they fail. Understand as much as you can, but know your own service very deeply. Now, he uses the words professions as kind of like a life stage, a career stage profile. Understand how the difference between a junior engineer and a senior engineer, how they think. Think back to when you were junior and how you approach problems, and leverage that to make your team stronger. Gain and loss in worldly matters. Do you know the business value that your product provides? What does it mean for your customer? What does it mean for your business? The dollars and cents side of thing. Too often operations is treated as a cost center because we don't really see how we fit into the overall business. Understand that. Intuition. Having intuition, how many of us have looked at something and said, that's just not gonna work? Understand why you think it's not gonna work and tease out what is the thing that you're instinctively reacting to that is wrong with that system, and develop that. Perceive things that cannot be seen. Know the entirety of your system, monitoring everywhere, all the way down into the stack. Don't just assume that some component works. Have metrics on it. There are no small services, only small SREs. Even your backup systems, your build system, all of these are key services that you need to pay attention to, not just your production service that's facing the end user. You need to know that they work and apply the same discipline in managing those systems that you do your production environments. Don't waste time. Avoid toil. Life's too short to spend time working on meaningless, pointless stuff. So automate it, get rid of it. And there's one last piece of advice that is probably the most important one that he gave. Done. Here it comes. Instill vigor in your hairline. Thank you. Who's next? Oh, well, I will take advantage of this. His hair is actually buried separately from him. It's so vigorous, they actually had to bury it in a different location. It's true, read about it.